Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are undertaking a massive, absolutely fascinating journey into the dense, multi-millennial history of Palestine. We're going to rely strictly on the provided historical source texts to really understand exactly how we arrived at today's incredibly complex geopolitical landscape. We've got a vast amount of ground to cover as we unpack the layers of this region's past, so let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this chronological roadmap. We'll start with the ancient roots, move into the 20th century turning point of the British Mandate, examine the 1948 partition, explore the PLO and the Intifadas, analyze the Oslo diplomacy, and finally look at the region's realities and future prospects. Section 1. Ancient Roots to Ottoman Rule, Defining the Geography and Early Civilizations. Now, what's really interesting about this is how rapidly and repeatedly this region changed hands over thousands of years. It's like a giant historical puzzle. Around 3000 BCE, Canaanite desert nomads first arrive. Then you fast forward past various empires and uprisings, and the Romans rename the region Palestine around 70 AD. From there, we see the Islamic conquest in 634 AD under Caliph Omar, which brings a massive cultural shift, followed by the Crusaders capturing Jerusalem in 1099. Finally, all of this turbulence settles into a remarkable 400-year period of stability under the Ottoman Empire, starting right in the early 16th century. Across all these eras, the descendants of those ancient Canaanites, alongside shifting religious and ethnic groups, experienced a profound evolution of identity. Section 2. British Mandate and Rising Tensions, the 20th Century Turning Point. Let's slow down for a second and look at the 20th century, because this is where the modern conflict truly takes shape. A momentous and frankly unprecedented catalyst during this era was the Balfour Declaration. Drafted in 1917 by the British Foreign Secretary, it officially endorsed the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. According to the source text, this was heavily driven by Britain's strategic desire to secure Jewish support during World War I and to lock down their own geopolitical interests in the region. Following that declaration, we see a very distinct procedural escalation under British colonial rule. After the Ottoman defeat in World War I, the League of Nations officially gave Britain the mandate over Palestine, and during this period of British rule, organized immigration literally tripled the Jewish population, taking it from roughly 10% to 30%. Meanwhile, the native Palestinian population lived under strict military law and a state of emergency for nearly 30 years, all the way up until 1936. Section 3. 1948. Partition and Displacement. The Formation of Israel and the Nakba. Things move incredibly fast here. In 1947, a UN partition plan was passed, which proposed separate Jewish and Arab states. However, this effort immediately gave way on May 14, 1948, when David Ben-Gurion unilaterally declared the State of Israel. This declaration instantly triggered the Arab-Israeli War, pulling in 5 invading Arab armies and resulting in massive, sweeping displacement across the entire territory. So, the crucial point is this statistic right here, 78%. Following that 1948 conflict, the new State of Israel came to occupy 78% of the former British Mandate territory. I mean, this drastically altered the map and the fundamental reality for everyone living there. The text details an incredibly heavy human cost. The resulting displacement of the Palestinian people was immense. In the southern sector alone, 30,000 villagers were expelled. Major, affluent cities like Jaffa and Haifa were heavily depopulated, basically turning into ghost towns. Ultimately, over 3/4 of the Palestinian population were sent into exile, forced from rural areas into urban bastions or across borders. This massive demographic upheaval is described historically and culturally as the Nakba, which literally translates to catastrophe. Section 4. The PLO and Intifadas, Resistance and Representation. Over the decades following 1948, the displaced population, now largely in exile or living under new governance, began to formalize their resistance. The key organization that emerged was the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, formed in 1964. Under Yasser Arafat's leadership, starting in 1969, the PLO completely shifted its strategy. They moved away from merely publicizing the cause to initiating active armed struggle. Now, despite the profound controversy and conflict this brought, it eventually gained them major diplomatic traction, culminating in 1974 when the UN General Assembly recognized the PLO as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. But, resistance wasn't just top-down. In December 1987, the first Intifada broke out. This was a deeply grassroots uprising. It started in the Jabalia refugee camp and involved youth burning tires, boycotts, strikes, and massive protests. And what's fascinating is that this popular uprising occurred entirely outside of the PLO's direct framework. It was driven locally by people who were just overwhelmed by military occupation. Section 5. Oslo Accords and Diplomacy. Attempting a two-state solution. This localized unrest really paved the way for international diplomacy in the 90s, and this brilliantly illustrates the foundation of those accords. Just notice the severe asymmetry in the mutual recognition letters exchanged at the start of the Oslo process. Arafat's letter explicitly recognized Israel's right to exist, committed to UN resolutions, and renounced terrorism. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's letter recognized the PLO as a representative body, but notably omitted any mention whatsoever of Palestinian statehood or UN resolutions. According to the documents, this established an unequal framework that was basically baked into the Oslo Accords from day one. Yet, at the time, there was incredible optimism, as captured in this famous 1993 quote from the Declaration of Principles, hoping for a peace settlement between two states. However, despite that iconic handshake on the White House lawn, the text shows how vital final status issues, like the rights of refugees and the status of Jerusalem, were completely bypassed in favor of smaller interim agreements. So the core of the conflict was left unresolved. Section 6. Realities and Future Prospects. The Modern Political Landscape. Let's see how all of this builds into the reality of today. The modern era presents a heavily fragmented and complex picture. Following elections in 2006, Hamas came to power in Gaza, resulting in economic blockades, while the PLO manages affairs in the West Bank. A half-century of occupation, continued settlement construction, and internal political splits have severely fractured the land. The remaining Palestinian territory now resembles an archipelago. Because of this, the source texts note that to many observers, the long-sought two-state solution looks increasingly like an orchestrated illusion rather than a viable reality. Which brings us to a provocative final thought. With shifting borders and stalled diplomacy, what does a viable future look like for Palestine? The thousands of years of dense history, shifting empires, and decades of modern conflict make the path forward incredibly uncertain. But understanding this foundation is absolutely vital to grasping the realities of tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring, keep reading, and definitely keep questioning what you see on the map.